Hope you're having a great day. We are very excited to have everyone back for another, I think, volume 7 of our Grow Up Live webinar. I don't want to take up too much time because we've got four amazing panelists. But I do want to just once again give thanks to Randy Rowe and Dania Dixon. They are the brains and face behind the Grow Up Conference. We are hoping to see as many of you come October 5th and 6th in Niagara Falls. So as long as we keep safe, take care of others, we hope to be live in Niagara Falls in the first week of October. And we got some special things lined up there. Extraction Magazine, if you happen to subscribe to Extraction Magazine or Terpenes and Testing, those folks are putting on the extraction zone. So we're going to have a little bit of extra focus around extraction, which is great as we move into more information around edibles and topicals. And then we are also going to do a little deeper dive into psychedelics. So we're going to do a couple of days of psychedelics to talk a bit about what we can be getting from the new movement around mushrooms. I do encourage you to go to the website, read some of the bios around some of our speakers, because I'm going to do a terrible job introducing them. They are, as if you might have noticed on my LinkedIn, I refer to these panelists as my friends and colleagues, and honestly, I use them to not only help teach the course that I'm teaching at the Nova Scotia Community College. It is, and I should mention that some of my students are attending this seminar, so I don't actually have to teach this afternoon. It's great, but this is a real good excuse for me to learn a lot about integrated pest management and interesting ways of growing outdoors. So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction. I do encourage you to use either the chat or the Q&A to pose questions. Hopefully we'll get some time to answer those questions. We've got an incredibly gifted group here. I want to start out by introducing a colleague of mine who I work with at Green Star Plant Products with Gaia Green and GrowTech. Rico Thorson comes to us originally from Denmark. Rico now has a consulting company in the Okanagan, RT Consulting, and as an arborist by training, Rico has worked both in Europe and in Canada and North America. We just have great sessions just talking about regenerative organic cannabis. I'm just absolutely fascinated by some of his work that he's doing with microbials. So I look forward to hearing from Rico. Through the magic of webinars and conferences, I've been able to connect with Anu Solomon from CannaProtect. She's the founder of CannaProtect, and just absolutely excited. I would recommend CannaProtect to any cultivation facility. She's going to make your cultivation team feel very comfortable and confident in what they're doing, and that's the most important thing, I think, is to have a consultant come in there and really give you the information you want and the way to conduct proper scouting and really do a great job on IPM. So excited about hearing what Anu has. I'll probably rope her in to teach the students at the college as well. Our next speaker will be Claude Robert. Claude comes to us from Anatis Bioprotection, and all of these speakers have been abused by me in terms of whenever I can't figure anything out, I send out that email out to this group and get some fascinating results. Claude is a practitioner of cannabis consumption. And is quite knowledgeable about around the genetics and growing the plants. And what he provides his clients is absolutely sound advice, economical. He really truly understands the economics of cannabis production and gives you the exact information you need to really address whatever challenges you're facing. And lastly, and certainly not least, I think one of the most brilliant minds in cannabis academics right now, Zamir Punja, has delivered so much valuable information around pest management as well as nutritional deficiencies, just doing some incredibly applied and basic research around the cannabis plant. And the fact that we are, and one of the main reasons of trying to have this little webinar is the idea that cannabis is expanding across North America and the world, and we're starting to see a lot of pests and pathogens that we've never seen before. So we look forward to hearing from all of them. And with that, I am just going to turn it over to Rico.
Hello, everyone. Brief introduction. This is the first of a kind that I've been invited to. I'm not necessarily a cannabis guy as such. Like I've said, my name is Rico Thorsen, owner of RT Horticulture Limited. I'm a horticulturist by trade and an arborist, as I've said. Had my degree from Europe, immigrated to Canada 20-some years ago. My company is about 10 years old right now, and it focuses on horticulture and agriculture regenerative practices. And that's basically what I do every day. I work with vineyards, orchards, agriculture farm, horticulture farms like nurseries, greenhouses. And I'm currently working with one hemp grower, outdoor hemp grower, and two cannabis growers, indoor cannabis growers. So my experience with cannabis is not big, and but what I'd like to sort of focus on today, I want to focus on cover crops, specifically relay cropping, what that's all about. I think it's a very underutilized method, and I think that the cannabis and hemp grower industry really could reap a lot of benefits from. And the other part is the use of microbial. I know that even within Health Canada, a lot of you growers have a range of products that you can use. Some of them has microbes in them. I want to talk a little bit about the use of them and maybe how to get even more out of them. So I'll jump right into it. we've been giving sort of a 7 to 10 minutes short spiel here. So I'll start with cover crops. I want to start by saying that the biggest myth in my mind is that cover crops outcompete or compete with the cast crop that you're growing for water and nutrient and all that. And I want to make sure that you all understand that's simply not true. If you bring the right combination of cover crops even together with your cannabis and or hemp crop, you will actually reap tremendous amount of benefits. We refer to that as a relay crop. So a relay crop is typically planted with or seeded along with your either hemp or cannabis crop. So whether you grow them outdoors in large containers or right in the soil or whatever you do, we have worked the last couple of years of fine-tuning some blends that that is seeded along with your either hemp or cannabis crop, that grows up along with it. It shares nutrients. It shades the soil. One of the biggest things, if there's diversity in and around your soil above ground, there's diversity below ground. And that is a completely 100% natural way to make sure that your hemp or cannabis plants stay healthy. I want to talk a little bit about the groups that we use. There's a combination of plants that we know now, studies has shown over and over again, not just to bring your soil health up, but also your plant health, is that if you bring this combination of plants together, they do absolute magic. So those includes grasses, legumes, brassicas, some non-brassicas, and some forbs. If you have a blend, and of course your either cannabis or hemp crop is one of those, fits into one of those groups. So what you are after is to try to bring that group together with species that are known to share. For example, legume will take will fixate nitrogen out of the air and store it. And as your hemp or cannabis crop grows up over and above that clover and starts shading it out, that clover is going to start to share some of that nutrient. It's a really good strategy, and it's completely underutilized. I'm speaking about it today because I've had two cannabis growers started 2 years back who were mixing their own soil. They were doing a lot of fantastic stuff. They had it was an inside, it was a greenhouse operation. They had beds inside, and they had put worms in, and they'd done all sorts of stuff. And I said to him, why aren't we growing relay crops underneath? And so he started that, and he says, like, right away his pest and disease went down by, I think he said 60% or something like that right off the bat. He says he had to spray less. The quality of his cannabis, like his harvest, was better. He had to tinker less, much less. And what happened, and this was the most amazing part, I thought, I kind of knew that was going to work for him, but typically what he would done after he would harvest, he would harvest his bed, he pretty much replaced the soil and all that stuff. And I said, well, once you harvest your cannabis, why don't you just harvest them, like cut them off, leave the roots there and plant the new plant right beside. You have a cover crop already growing there. It required one mowing so that the new cannabis crop could start establishing itself. And so now he goes, I think 5 or 6 crops before he starts replacing that soil, which was also a huge benefit for him. So there's a lot to be said about this part, but just some strategies there. Relay cropping, as I said, I worked with Kevin Elmy from Cover Crops Canada. Him and I are currently doing a lot of work with cover crop blends. There's a lot of different genetics within the cannabis, and we're trying to get these blends just right. I just wanted to mention it today as a sort of a way to think about that this could be something you guys should really look at. I want to move right along to microbes. My company over the last 4 or 5 years have done a tremendous amount of work with microbes. And it came out of frustration really from the fact that in the core, I felt it was wrong that a lot of North American companies were looking for that one microbe, and we found one, root shield might be one of them, Trichoderma T22, because it had these traits that we were looking for. And I was frustrated because in the end of the day, that's in my mind, that's not how nature works. Nature works in harmony with a bunch of things, both funguses and bacteria together. It's a harmony of a lot of things. So my company started to do a lot of work with understanding, by testing soils and try to understand what was in them and why they were there, what functions they possibly had. It's led to my own little microbial blend right now, which I look at being very, very basic, and it's got seven different microbes in it. And I mean, like, this whole microbial world is so big. There's so much to learn. But instead of talking about a whole bunch of these microbes, what I want to talk about is on your Health Canada list here of you have this list of all the things that you guys can use or can't use. And if you scroll through that, you'll see there's microbes in there. And one of the things, if I took one of them out, if I took root shield out, Trichoderma Fusarium T2022, I worked with that probably since 2002, 2003. And what we found with that is, rather than, if you look at the paper, it gives you a suggestion of the rate and when to apply it, to get it to do what you want it to. And all I want to say is there's so much more to that. For example, a lot of you grow, if you're an indoor grower, or even if you grow pots, large pots on the outside, you have some sort of a compost, peat, perlite mix. We found that Trichoderma would last, if we applied it the way the label said, we found that it would last that 4 to 6 weeks. So it had really good effects, and then we sort of die off. So some of the work that we did was that we went and saying, well, why don't we go half rate? And again, this is just a matter of looking into, where do you find Trichoderma in nature? Where does it host? Where is it? What does it live off of? What is its home? And when you do that, you'll see that it hosts around high lignin organic matter, like bark. So what we did, we took some semi-composted fir and pine bark, and we inoculated, we added just 5% into that peat mix of that. And then we went half rate with the Trichoderma with root shield. And we found that we allowed that microbes to really be effective for much longer, even at half rate. And then what we did, so if you follow the label rate, it says, every forget what it says, every 4 to 8 weeks, you should reapply. So what we did was we went half rate. And then we went, after 6 weeks, we applied the other half rate. So what we found is, so we're still only, so money-wise, we're still only spent the same money. But what we found is we doubled the length of high effectiveness from that microbe just by adding 5% of bark into it, because now the microbes had a place to host and sort of attach to it. It likes that. It likes that as a home. So that was just one little thing I just wanted. And there's lots of these to share.
And sorry, Rico.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I am, maybe we can, if we have more time at the end, maybe we can talk about a few other examples, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
And it speaks to the fact that we really needed to probably have more time around this topic. But with that, I do want to move it over to Anu, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies. Thanks so much, Rico.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Anu Solomon. So I own CannaProtect IPM Solutions. I have a bit of a squeaky voice today because I lost my voice. It's kind of coming back, so it may squeak every now and then. I also scribbled over all of my notes because everything Rico was saying was amazing. So I'm going to have to wing what I was saying because I can't read my notes now. Uh, so I'm going to I want to talk to you about scouting those crops. So as Rico is talking about the holistic approach to growing, that is such a brilliant and beautiful way of looking at your cannabis crop. So we want to think about the plant as more than just one little entity. We need to look at the environment and the soil and the air and the atmosphere. So part of that is when you're working with your plants. I'm teaching a beautiful group of students right now for the Career Foundations in Hamilton, and I think some of my students are in this seminar right now, so I'm really nervous because of it. But I've been explaining to them that when they move into their facilities, whether they're a production worker, whether they're QC, it doesn't matter what department you are. If you are working with these plants, your eyes are on these plants. Hi, Neil. If you're working with these plants, your eyes are already on them. And just because if you are a cultivation technician, it doesn't mean that I'm not IPM. That's not my job. I don't need to look for the flaw in the flawless, as I like to say. Your eyes are already on it. So why wouldn't you want to take that extra time to see what the plant is trying to tell you by showing you? And as we all know, plants clearly can't speak to us. So their way of speaking to us is by showing us. We are so used to seeing this beautiful green canopy, these beautiful, healthy, lush, vibrant green leaves. And when somebody comes into the situation that we don't want, when there's a pest or a pathogen, then the leaf is going to show us in a way, whether it's drooping or its color is changing, or maybe there's a scratch mark. And that's up to us. So as you're working with these plants, the idea is if you're just deleafing, don't think of it as that's my one tunnel vision goal of the day. I'm just deleafing or defoliating or debranching. I actually want to be looking for any sign that maybe the plant is in distress. So scouting techniques are actually quite simple. It's actually quite a common sense thing, but I think people get intimidated thinking that it's something more than what it really is. You are already touching this beautiful, beautiful plant. You're already looking at it. So you're going to start, it's up to you. I mean, there's no specific structure, but the key points are make sure you inspect every inch of the plant and even the location. So we're going to start by looking at the top of the leaf surface, because in the case of a spider mite or a thrip, they're going to, oh, Austin, thank you. I keep reading, I'm not going to read the comments. I get so distracted. Squirrels on the side. So the top of the leaf is going to have very, very distinct scratch marks or stippling marks from the sap feeding. So the insects have very distinct ways of feeding on the plants. So a two-spotted spider mite is going to leave a very distinct, almost like a pinprick or a pen stipple mark on the top of the leaf. A thrip will leave sort of an irregular scratch mark discoloration on the top of the leaf. Now, the cannabis aphid, for example, that's a tricky one because the cannabis aphid does not leave your typical feeding damage scratch mark on a leaf surface. Aphids actually feed via the sap in the phloem on the stem. So the concentration of aphids is usually found on the actual stem. And so in the case of the spider mite or the thrip leaving that very obvious physical damage, the flaw in the flawless leaf, the aphids are actually sucking out that vital fluid that needs to be moving around the plant. So in the case of an aphid infestation, your plants indoors or outdoors, they actually might be misdiagnosed as being underwatered, overwatered. Maybe they're being misdiagnosed with a nutrient deficiency or a toxicity, maybe necrosis, chlorosis, those kind of things. So you need to look at your, again, this is where Rico was talking about growing as a holistic concept. You can't just look at the plant as a singular entity and say, well, it's yellow, it's chlorotic, it must be a nutrient deficiency. That's not the way you need to think about your plants, because again, even similar concept, I've mentioned this in an article I was discussing about hop latent viroid. So they are two different entities again, but hop latent viroid can also present similar symptoms of infestation as a cannabis aphid, where the plant is weak, it's fragile looking, maybe it's a little discolored, the leaves are abnormal shaped. So what you need to do when you want to scout as you're inspecting the top of the leaf, look for the damage. Maybe on the underside, the presence of two-spotted spider mite, the damage will be on the top of the leaf surface, but they will be hanging out on the underside. It's going to look like dirty, gross, salt and pepper. It's going to look like sand. It's just not going to look right. You're literally going to flip the leaf over and you're going to go, ooh, what's on the bottom of my leaf? It looks really dirty. It's going to make you want to brush it off. And your leaf shouldn't look like that. You'll also see, most likely your telltale webbing, signs of webbing underneath. So from that point, you want to look down that stem. And again, as I said, on the petiole, which is where the leaf attaches to the main stem, you may have an aphid concentration hanging out there. The strongest aphids will be found on the main stem, where the majority of the fluids in that phloem of the vascular system are concentrated. Aphids are very competitive. So the strongest will be in the area where the food is concentrated, and the weaker ones will be forced onto the petiole, and then the weakest ones will be forced onto the leaves. So then as you go down, you're scouting, you're looking, even you will find powdery mildew on stems in worst case scenario, heaven forbid. As you get to your soil, we want to look at the top of the soil. Is your soil kind of moving? Is it moving a little bit? If it looks like it's moving, get down there and have a look. Get your little jeweler loop scope out. Make sure it's a 30 to 60, maybe 40 magnification. Look at that soil surface. Soil-dwelling pests like fungus gnat and thrip will be, adult thrips will be on the leaves, but the pupal and larva stages will be in the soil. So fungus gnats will lay their eggs in the soil surface. The thrip, pupa, and larval stages will actually land in the soil. So as they are growing, that's why your soil surface will kind of look like it's glistening or moving. That's where you want to go get your nematodes. Your nematodes are a microscopic, almost like a worm-like predator that you would water into your soil, and that will help combat. They will feed on those soil-dwelling pests in that top level of your surface. Also, looking at your soil, is there algae? Is there algae growing on top of your soil surface? Because that could be an indicator that maybe your fertigation irrigation could be off. Maybe your moisture levels are off. Too much moisture also, the sun just rose in my house. Holy cannolis. I don't know what happened there. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties as always, and Ridgeway. So anyhow, moving along, basically, as I was saying, so in that moist area, fungus gnats will breed. So if on your soil surface you have pooling water, fungus gnats will breed in that puddled pooling water. So if you have algae on your floor around your plants, get rid of it, because it becomes a breeding ground for fungus gnats as well, shore flies too. So you've looked at your soil surface. Look at your pot. Look at your pot underneath. If you see a salt crust, maybe you're seeing white or yellow things, you will see fungus growing around there. White salt crusts could mean that your EC levels are too high. Just taught my students this. EC, your total dissolved solids, are too high. Check your fertigation, guys. So at that point, look at the base of your pot. If you can, depending on the growth scenario, if you can, look underneath your pot. If you see ants milling around the base of your pots, I've gotten down and I have crawled for a couple 100 yards underneath canopies because I've been following ants. And where those ants have actually led me is to an aphid and a whitefly infestation. So again, it's that holistic concept that there are so many factors when it comes to your plants, that looking at your plant as a whole, the environment, who's hanging around your plant? Ants want to feed on the honeydew that's excreted by the aphid and the whitefly. So ants can be an indicator of a secondary infestation in your crop too. So cannabis growing is all about thinking outside the box. It's not just black and white. The regulations are always black and white. There is no gray area. we know there's a gray area, but from the Health Canada compliance perspective, there is no gray area. What the regulations say cannot be argued with. You will be in non-compliance and you risk your license. So whatever those regulations say, you must stick with them. One of the things Rico was discussing, I just quickly want to touch base on it. I have no idea what my timeline is here. Rico, as I can read Rico's notes, but not mine. So Rico was talking about the mixing of the microbials, where he was talking about the root shield. He was mixing a half rate at every 6 weeks. I'm sorry if I may have scribbled incorrectly. And adding 5% of the fir and pine bark. I would need to confirm with Health Canada that that is something that we would be allowed to do. Rico, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you clarified if that was allowed. So if Rico didn't clarify that before anybody chooses to do that, please let's make sure that that is something that Health Canada will allow within the facility as well. But I think that's a brilliant idea, and I actually want to look into that, because the concept of IPM, for people who aren't sure, integrated pest management and integrated crop management, the idea is we don't want to do that blanket pest application. Oh, we have a problem. The old school thought is just blanket it with some chemical and clear it up and call it good. We are far more health conscious. We care more about the plant and our own well-being. So we don't want to just be putting, the glyphosates and the arguments of that. It's now about the environment. And that's the concept of IPM, is we want to be environmentally sound, but we also want to consider the wallet of the person, the client, the customer as well. So Rico's concept of trying to figure out ways to reduce the amount of chemical being applied is brilliant. And the fact that these gentlemen are sitting here and trying to figure out ways to reduce the label rates, it's amazing, because most people, when they look at the label rates, you cannot go above them. If you go above the mixing label rate, Health Canada is going to hold your crop, and there's the possibility you will be told to destroy that crop. That's a lot of money.
Sorry to interrupt again, Anu. And I know that you've got a great teaser in there at the end there about how to get around or maybe into the gray of Health Canada's regulations. And so I'm going to try to hold that and bring it back in the question period. This is I do want to just encourage, as long as people can stick around, we will answer the questions. I don't want to hold panelists to stick around after the hour, but if people want to attend, we will try to answer all of the questions. Thank you so much. It's always terrible when you invite a speaker who's going to make your students think, why don't we have her as our teacher? I'm going to now introduce Claude. I'm sure you'll make my students think the same as well. Claude.
Hi, everybody. It's great. I would like to thank everybody at Grow Up au Cannabis events to have this possible in this crazy times we're living. I just can't hope to see everybody in person. When it started, I was going to the Growing Summit in BC, and then the crazy ages have started. But now at least we have these kinds of events, that the second best that we can do before we meet each other in person again. So myself, I've been a cannabis enthusiast since 1987. We had a chance to have a mother of a friend that let us grow a couple of plants. So I've been a passionate since then. I've been working in greenhouse research since 2004, work with the Minister of Agriculture of Quebec, with the pest and pathogen alert team, and doing different projects on the spotted wing Drosophila and all sorts of other things, many things I could talk about so long about. And then I started with Anatis in 2008. At first I was assignated to greenhouse crops, vegetable produce, and then they noticed that I was really fond of that plant, and I had lots of knowledge and passion. So since then, it's been a little while. We have an official cannabis division at Anatis Bioprotection, and we used to take care of only insects, pests. Now we take care of pathogens too. So we're kind of doing a lot of research and development, and lots of projects with a lot of universities, people, and things like that. Things I could talk for a long time about too. So I know that time is flying. So further on, I will go on. I will time myself too. So I'm sure that we are on time. So let's start about growing in the great outdoors. How to protect your plants. I'm going to talk about a couple of things that you can do to help protect your plants. There's a lot of uncertainties with Health Canada about what plants you're able to grow with your plants inside a facility. I know that certain people will do indicator plants, some will do cover crop plants with living soil, some will do some even banker plants. We have now licensed producer are using banker plants as an aphid. So in fact, I think if the end product is free of microbial contaminants and you're not selling the plant that you're using at your facility, I think you could do that inside too. But going back outdoors, it's really free. You could use companion plants for your cannabis garden. So there's many examples. Rico was talking about clover. It's a very good plant because it is multifaceted, the advantages it gives for on the part of nutrition, but also attracting beneficials. That's what the purpose of companion planting, as a part of it I'm going to talk about, is to attract beneficials into your garden. So that the natural beneficials that are already present around could help you in your garden. And also when you release some beneficials that are indigenous, they'll have somewhere to hang out and to live and to breed and be around your plants to protect your cannabis plants. So what we like to use against aphids getting more and more of an issue in Canada. I had some fields in Ontario that had the cannabis aphid. They assured me that it was just seeds they started, and so I suspect something went wrong along the chain of the plants coming into the facilities ground on the acres they planted, because I don't think it's endemic yet in Canada, the cannabis aphid. I hope not, but I don't think it is endemic yet. I think it came from Colorado, West Coast, and now it's really present. It arrived with all the new strains, the I call them, lemon tree, wedding cake, whatever. So they brought a whole host of predators, pests that we have now with these wonderful strains. So Aphidoletes aphidimisa, the aphid predatory midge that we're seeing now in action. It's the larva that eats, that will feed on the aphids. You see here we see eggs next to the aphids. So the eggs are very special. They look like little pills. They arrive in a tray, the pupa, in a kind of a mix, vermiculite mix kind of a. So when they arrive to your facility, you make sure that it's still humid in the tray a bit, not too much. It's still moist. Then if it's not moist, you have to damp it with a small spray to make sure. Maybe they have started to emerge too. You have to watch that before you spray. And if they're started to emerge and the substrate is moist enough, then you let it as is. You let just a little crack in the opening of the tray. It's like usually they come in a plastic clamshell. So you let them emerge, and then we call it the love box. You let them reproduce together, and then you will release them. So after a day, I would say, of seeing them moving around in the box, but you make sure it's in the shade, especially. So you prefer doing it in a facility at 20 degrees Celsius, something like that. Maybe not out in the sun somewhere it's going to rot or something like that. You make sure that no direct sun directly on the little container. Then they're going to emerge from that, and then they're going to go around. They are really active at dusk and dawn. Here we see another predation view of the larva. So here we see the adult. It likes to hang out on the spider webs. I like to let people keep their spider webs until the end, because they can catch beneficial, but they catch also pests, and some take advantage of the spider web and they like to rest on it. I don't know, they made a partnership with the spider, but so the Aphidoletes, this is a slide, this is from a great book, the Biocontrol Handbook from my great friend David Spencer from Applied Bionomics. It's free, it's on Apple Books, go and get it. Really tons of nice info on there. This is something that we'll introduce in the field at the beginning. We can introduce it like from 250 to 1,000 per acre every week for a while until we see a population established. It's always a case by case. We could have a reactive rate too if we have an aphid infestation. I like to use also the green lace wing, but just as an intervention, not as a prevention. I think Botrytis aphidimisa is the best preventive we could use for aphids outside. Neoseiulus fallacis. Spider mites are not really, coming from my own experience of the legacy days and whatever, spider mites have never been a big issue outside. We even put some infested plants outside and nature would take care of them. But in certain years, like especially like, for example, right now in Quebec, we have rain today, but it was one of the worst droughts they've seen in history. And like on dry years, it could be a problem, even especially if your starting material had already spider mites on it when you introduce them in the field. And let's say you hit like a week of really hot temperatures and everything. So we like to introduce Neoseiulus fallacis because it's an indigenous species that we rear ourselves. And it's also, we use it. We had years of experience in raspberries. So raspberries is not really close to cannabis, but I mean, it's a side kind of some type of bush. It could have the same size and everything. And the raspberry growers that buy them from us, this year, and they stay there for many years. But it's not the same for cannabis. It's annual plants or everything. Every year they cut the plants down and everything. Maybe it's going to hang around. I don't know. We haven't done experiments, but I know it hangs around in raspberries. So here is the view inside a bottle of the Neoseiulus fallacis. Neoseiulus fallacis is great also, not just against spider mites, but also against brown mites. It is and it could fight a bit the hemp mite. But the hemp mite is very tough. There's not many predators that are really efficient. It's mainly you have to use the oils that are allowed. But something that I'm going to touch just at the end of the presentation, there's no biopesticide yet allowed by Health Canada for cannabis production in the field. There's one herbicide, I don't know why, tree soil fumigant, chlorpicrin, very toxic. I used to discourage my small fruit growers from using that because it kills everything in the soil for a long time. And I don't know what Zamir thinks about that. Anyways, one herbicide, and there's two fungicides, but there's no biopesticide yet. So I'll talk about just a bit more about it a bit later. So fallacis, we introduce them. We have it on bean leaf format or on vermiculite, so we can sprinkle them. When usually we go in the field and to introduce them, we'll make sure that the wind is at our back, so it helps us spread them around because they're very they can travel with the wind too. So the application rate of Neoseiulus fallacis, you see here the application rate that we're going to use. We're going to use a more population against the brown mite. So that's it for raspberry currants, because there's not been any application done formally with any university. I know Sébastien Jacob, I'm a Niagara College runner. Any other, I don't know, that have formal curriculums that we could establish at one point with the Minister of Agriculture a real application rate. But anyways, I base myself again on raspberries to be close to it. Is a good intervention for against trips. Trips also is the same thing as spider mites a bit. If you have trips on the plants that you planted outside, there might be an issue if the conditions were right for them. But usually it's not a big issue, except if you're surrounded by any fields that might have a lot of trip population, like onion fields, any leeks, onions, garlic fields, wheat, hay. If there's any farmer harvesting their hay or wheat or any grain, you might have swarms of trips coming to your field very soon. They want to migrate, they want to find another spot, and they will find anything they can to come and survive. So you see this weird cloud coming up to you and coming in. So we release or use between 2,000 4,000 individual per acre. I would say. Aureus is already present naturally. So with the beneficial plants that you planted, you're going to attract them, the companion plants, you're going to attract a natural population already. Another issue, it's getting more and more important, cannabis, as the fields are getting bigger with hemp and official legal cannabis, microbes, or I had customers at 12,000 plants or more last year. California style, like 12 feet tall and very nice round bushes. Anyway, so we had prevented, so we didn't see any. But this is what you see on the screen now is the opening hole of the borer, the European corn borer that should have been named the hemp borer, because it just discovered corn and potatoes when it arrived with the settlers in North America. Before it was just in Eurasia, was just infesting hemp, cannabis, and also millet. And so the corn borer, now it infects pepper, other plants too. So the thing is, what we do, what damage it can do. I had some stories from some harvesters of a big licensed producer that had a big outdoor crop. Anyways, I won't say more, but anyways, after I think 20% of their plant were infested. So what happens is that the flower turn brown near the harvest, because, and you open up your stem and you see 1 or 2 or 3 of these larvae boring their way across the stem. So we have a way to fight them organically with the trichogram wasps. So the trichogram wasps are tiny parasitoid wasps that will go and parasitize the eggs of the corn borer. So we kill the problem in the egg. And I find it better than BT, the Bacillus thuringiensis, because BT kills anything. Trichogramma is retargeted. So we use Trichogramma austrinia, which is the best. We believe it's even better than Brassica for the corn borer. And so we apply them. So the cycle, the female lays an egg in the host egg. The larva eats the future embryo and develops. The eggs will turn black because usually it's very hard to see. You have to be a trained scout to find them in a cornfield or a cannabis field. Even this.
Apologies.
Yes.
Oh, do you mind just wrapping up?
Yeah, speeding up. Yeah, I'm almost done.
You.
Yeah. So application of trichogramma, we're doing still some testing this year on cannabis and hemp with drone dispersal, but our old style method was on cards. We glue 4,000 to 8,000 pupae on a card, and we spread them in the field. And every week they release themselves and they go and find so we put 1 card every 100 square meter, and this is the application rate. And biopesticide, like I said before, we hope that Bioceres will be allowed in 2022. We're doing tests this year, efficacy trials. So it would be the first biopesticide because we're just approved in California. It's another country than the USA. We're already approved there, and in Canada too. So this year it starts for all small fruit producers, lettuce, spinach, and many other crops. It's allowed in the field production. No no application. What is the beauty also of Bioceres? There's no phytotoxicity, and inside it out, there's no limit of application. It's 0-hour delay of harvest and 4-hour re-entry in a greenhouse. And outside, it's it doesn't affect. So it will be something in the future that will be a good thing. So we tested, we're best bee friendly. So thank you very much for everything. Thank you, Av. Thank you, people at Cannabis. And
no, thank you, Claude. And this really comes down to being my fault for choosing such brilliant panelists. And so generous panelists in terms of sharing all that information. And last but not least, Zamir Punja, take over, Zamir.
Great, thanks a lot. I'm sort of glad you left this talk to the last, because this is the goriest slide, which is going to have some pictures of disease plants and so on and so forth. So we may as well save the worst for the last. With that, I think I'll go ahead and start the presentation. And so as you see from the title slide here, we're working with pathogens, diseases of both cannabis and hemp. And what I'll do today is just talk about the emerging pathogens, which are those that are being recently discovered and which some of you may not be totally aware of. There's my email there if you need to send me an email afterwards. So I guess the first thing we need to talk about is where do these diseases originate from? And of course, there's many options, and I've listed all the ones that we know of here. They may be seed-borne, either on the seed, inside or outside. Propagative materials, for sure, cuttings taken from diseased plants will move pathogens. Diseased stock plants, mother plants, we know mother plants may hang around a facility for a couple of years. In some cases, they can harbor various types of pathogens and viruses. There may be pathogens in your growing medium, things like cocoa fiber that's perhaps hasn't been sterilized adequately. Certainly, there are a lot of pathogens present in the field. We can't ignore the fact that that's where these organisms survive and originate, and they'll get onto plants the minute the conditions are right. And then we'll end up with just talking about some pathogens that move in from adjacent fields. So as growers and producers, you need to be aware that these are the sorts of sources of these various disease-causing organisms, and it may be multiple sources in some facilities. Seed-borne, we've looked at some seed-borne pathogens. We find Alternaria quite commonly on both cannabis and hemp, and you see here are seeds that have germinated, and each one of them gave rise to colonies of Alternaria. We can find Fusarium on seeds as well, and there's probably a list of other fungi that can be present. And so sterilizing seed, whether you use bleach or xylitol or some other chemical, is going to be important as a starting point. These fungi, for example, here's Alternaria, can cause things like leaf spots. And as you see here on the right, you can get these stem cankers as well. So if you've seen any of these symptoms, some of them could have originated from seed, as well as from other sources, as you'll see in a couple of minutes. Fusarium, some of you are aware of Fusarium, causes a root rot, as well as a stem canker right here at the crown. And the most obvious symptom is a yellowing. The roots are destroyed. Plants can't take up nutrients, and they start to show the symptoms. You notice in the back, they are healthy plants. And so this is not a nutritional problem. Nutritional would affect these plants as well. This is the disease that's getting onto the root system. We know with Fusarium for sure that the infected mother plants, which actually may be asymptomatic, which means they're not showing any yellowing, can actually transmit the pathogen. So cuttings from these plants have to be looked at very carefully. We know Fusarium spreads in water. We know Fusarium can live in unsterilized growing media. And we also know that it can move with workers. And we know that Fusarium can originate from neighboring crops like tomato, cucumber, that may be in adjacent fields. So something like Fusarium has multiple sources of infection. It may be in your mother plants, or it may be coming in from the surrounding environment. Here's what would happen if you had Fusarium on a cutting. You see this abnormal yellowing and a very, very poorly developed root system, as well as some lesions down here. So when you see a cut like this, this is not something you want to use. You want to throw it away and pick those that are showing good, healthy root systems and good growth. There's many methods to test Fusarium, to manage Fusarium. You must test your plants, your stock plants, to see if they're infected with Fusarium internally. Check the growing medium, make sure there are no spores or other propagules. Minimize handling of plants. In an outdoor environment, we'll talk about this in a minute, they could be Fusarium residual from another crop, depending on what it was, tomato, beans, or it could originate from a current crop that's being planted where the pathogen is producing spores. And we'll talk about biological control products. There are some that are effective. Health Canada, PMRA, have a really long list of products that I think many of them are effective if they're used properly at the right time and at the right rate. Here's where we recommend biocontrol agents be applied early, when you're still in the rooting phase, possibly 2 weeks into rooting is when you want to establish these beneficial microbes. And you could always follow that up with another application at transplant. And you need a good colonization of the roots in order to prevent things like Fusarium and Pythium from taking over. Here's Fusarium in a natural environment. When I say natural, out in the field, this came from inoculum that was in a previous hay pasture crop. Fusarium must have resided in the soil, and it got onto the crown, as you see here. And within a matter of weeks, these plants were all wilting and dying. Not a lot that the grower could do, because This is already inoculum that's in the soil. It's already established itself. Here's another case of Fusarium that, as you can see, spread. We think this may have spread with residual inoculum in soil or possibly with water. You can see the uniform infection all the way through. This was a complete disaster for this particular producer. Again, you notice the yellowing and the death of these plants. This is not nutritional. This is a disease. With Pythium, similar thing, except you notice with Pythium, the roots are completely rotted away. Fusarium doesn't do that. Fusarium will travel up the vascular system. Pythium will rot the entire root system, particularly in a very wet soil. Here's Pythium again. You see the plants starting to wilt. They just can't take enough water because the roots are gone. And within a matter of days, these plants that were healthy on a Monday are pretty much dead by Friday. And that's Pythium. So what about the naturally occurring pathogens? These are the most difficult to manage because you don't know the problems there until you see the plant starting to die. And some of the preemptive approaches would include establishing these diverse microbial compositions that were talked about previously, either through cover crops or planting companion crops, or actually adding things like compost teas or other microbially active materials that can help outcompete the pathogen. Management of water, avoiding stress on the plant can also reduce diseases. But certainly knowing what was in the field prior to you planting your crop is going to be important to determine how much inoculum there may be present. Powdery mildew, we know that it's out there, and we also know it moves with cuttings. So if you see material like this, it's a good idea to avoid it because it'll just produce spores that will spread. And here you can see where it has spread onto the flowers and onto the bracts and so on. This crop is pretty much not worth harvesting. We know there are differences in cannabis genotypes or strains. Without worrying about all the details here, you see there are some that are highly susceptible and some that have a level of resistance. So there is a bit of good news with powdery mildew in that if you choose the strain that you like that has some tolerance to the disease, you may be able to manage it that way. Bud rot is a big problem on cannabis and hemp. You can see these startling photos of the disease developing on the flower. In this case, we think the spores are probably originating from other plants, cucumber, tomato, other plants that are close to the cannabis plants. The microenvironment, most of you know that when you have a dense canopy and you have high humidity, bud rot takes over and botrytis can be a major problem. It's a really difficult disease to manage because you can't spray the inflorescences, at least not up until 3 weeks before harvest, because you got to worry about what the residual carryover for beneficials might be. And there are differences, just like powdery mildew, in terms of resistance to botrytis. So knowing your strains, selecting your strains, and picking those that have been shown to have some resistance is a great idea. Sclerotinia, we saw sclerotinia last year, very distinct disease. You can see the stem canker symptoms on the plant. Here we know that the inoculum came from an adjacent field, which happened to be cabbage. Cabbage had sclerotinia, released spores, and it moved over into the hemp or cannabis field. So here's an example. Blueberries is another source of inoculum for a number of diseases that we're starting to see on cannabis. Here's a cannabis greenhouse about 150 meters away from a blueberry field, and there are pathogens that move over by wind mostly that get into the greenhouse and start causing problems. So I summarize this here. This was a cannabis or hemp field. If you've got neighbors that are growing tomato or blueberries, in one case garlic or cabbage, some of these diseases will move over. They'll fly over, just like we heard about insects moving over during harvest. These are during the season. Spores come in and land on cannabis plants, and if the conditions are right, you'll start to get disease happening. This was something that hadn't been really thought of before. These neighboring crops that may cause problems for cannabis growers. So, summary, knowing the origins of your pathogens is critical. You need to know what's out there and where it's coming from. If you are going to use biocontrol agents, put them on early during propagation so that you can get protection against Fusarium and Pythium. There are pathogens naturally present in soil. You can address those with microbial competitors. and there's a diverse choice of these. Neighboring fields can introduce inoculum. Know thy neighbors, but watch their crops, because they could be a source of inoculum that's moving over. And consult a plant disease specialist to confirm the disease that you're dealing with. And if you're wondering how I can talk so fast, my nickname is Zippy. And so I hope I haven't gone too fast. You certainly can get access to these slides, but I wanted to make sure we stayed on time, and we have hopefully time for some questions.
That was phenomenal, Zamir. Thanks so much. And yes, everything is being recorded, and Grow Up will send you a video recording of this presentation, so you can also grab Zamir's email off that presentation. I want to very quickly thank all of the panelists for their presentations, and as long as time allows, and if any of the panelists have to leave, by all means, please do. I just wanted to make sure I thank you. But now I was going to get to questions, and as I'm trying to open up my question panel, which I can't necessarily see right now. Hey, Zamir, I'll ask you the first question. You talked about soaking your seeds in bleach. What does that do for endophytes?
Yeah, I don't know that we know a lot about the endophytes that are seed-borne. I know we have endophytes in plants when they're established in soil. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the level of endophytes are in seed. So my gut feeling is that you're better off treating the seed to remove pathogens and maybe run a risk of removing your endophytes than not treating your seed at all.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to draw from right now. Unfortunately, I have to draw only from the chat. So if Randy or others can see the Q&A, they could ask questions. But the first question I have here is, what are some example of root crops? Clover was mentioned. So I mentioned some cover crops, and they're specifically asking for a zone 5B. So Rico, perhaps, do you have some other cover crop ideas that you can mention?
Yeah, so for example, where I live is actually zone 5B. So there's a lot of them. Rye, again, so any of these crops that I mentioned, you do need to make sure that you are within regulation before you use them. And the other thing you need to be careful of, just listen to Samir, make sure you don't pick a relay crop that is going to host perhaps a disease, so you are sort of shooting yourself in the foot here too. But oats are a fantastic plant to mine stuff out and sharing with. Bursum clover. Clover is just not a clover. I actually just answered a question for someone who was asking about that. Be very careful with what clover you put in there. Some are very aggressive and will not share as much as others will. Forbs. Forbs are like sort of in the radish family. Usually you'll need like 1 or 2% of them in your blend, just very, very few. Think of them as your salt and pepper on your food. You just need a little bit and they make a big difference. But just also in general, if I were to answer that question, there's a huge opportunity if you all listen to what you just heard here. There's a lot of ways to pick a relay crop that can benefit you below ground as much as it can above ground. Dill was in there. These are all parts of these blend too. So if you really take your time and sort of design this right, you can do amazing stuff.
Super, thank you. Anu, I'm going to ask a question here that comes up. Maybe to speak about the way of maybe using 2 similar biopesticides so that you can do better efficacy. Because somebody was asking, but what if you went with a higher rate, and we know that we want to be within the CFIA regulations around applications as well as Health Canada. So.
Okay, so it's very, very simple. the best thing to do is, number one, that rate. Okay, so you have your mixing rate on your label. Before you apply any chemical on your cannabis, make sure you go to the Health Canada PMRA, the Pesticide Management Regulatory Agency website, and you go and you would Google cannabis, and that is where it tells you exactly what Health Canada has approved, which chemicals are approved for use on cannabis. So that's the first thing you want to do. Then you're going to go and you're going to look at the registration number. So when you buy your chemicals for use on your cannabis, you need to make sure that that registration number on the PMRA website matches what's on your label. So then at that point, you're going to look at your label and your mixing rate. Do not go above that mixing rate. As I said before, if you do that, you will lose your crop, most likely. I don't want to say definitively, but yes, definitively you will. Secondly, never go above that. But the thing is, there's a second thank you. Sebastian just linked that. Sebastian's actually a wonderful IPM teacher at Niagara College that I have the privilege of working with as well. So basically what happens is there's also what's called a reapplication interval. So you cannot apply your chemical. If it says on that label that you cannot reapply before 7 days, if you reapply on the 6th day, again, you run the risk of losing your crop. You are non-compliant with that. So you have a crazy spider mite infestation or something, and you sprayed. Okay, let's just say you've sprayed Pure Spray Effects. I'm very partial to the horticultural oils. So Pure Spray Effects is a horticultural oil that's actually a triple threat. So it's a miticide, so it's going to attack your spider mites. It's going to deter your aphids from feeding, but it's also a fungicide, so it's going to combat your powdery mildew. So instead of applying 3 different chemicals, I'm applying 1 and I'm combating 3 things at the same time. So I'm saving money. I'm also being environmentally conscious, and I'm I'm putting as minimal things on my cannabis as possible. So the problem is, I did it on a Monday. It's a 7-day reapplication interval. I'm going into a very, very humid and hot weekend, and I'm really, really worried. So Friday, what am I going to do? I really want to put a protective barrier on my plants. I'm going to go back to my Health Canada PMRA website. I'm going to go find another horticultural oil under a different registration number. There are multiple ones. There's Sufoil X. I cannot remember the Vigol, Vegol. It's constantly coming on and off, so I'm not sure if it's currently on the list. There are multiple horticultural oils by different manufacturers with different registration numbers. So Monday, I'm going to apply Pure Spray Effects with registration number XYZ. Friday, I'm going to go and apply Sufoil X under a totally different registration number. I am completely in compliance. I have applied 2 horticultural oils within a 7-day interval. But the thing is, I have not applied the same registration number chemical. So I have completely stayed within compliance. I have completely adhered to the Health Canada PMRA website. I've done nothing wrong, but I have applied 2 horticultural oils within a 7-day interval. So for example, Millstop and Sirocco, these are both bicarbs. So again, do your research, go through that list. Just because there's 30 or 35 or 40, depending on the day, Health Canada pulls things on and off of that list every day. They go on, they go off, they go on, they go off. Check it daily. You might find that 6 of these items that are actually registered on them are actually the exact same chemical components, but because they are a different product with a different registration number, you are able to use those. So do not use the same product with the same registration number sooner than that specified reapplication interval time, but you can use a different product. I hope that is very clear. Do not use the same one. Go find a different product.
Perfect. And if it's not clear to anyone, you can always connect with Anu. I believe her email is available. And thank you. That was incredibly informative. Claude, for those Anglophones, embarrassingly, you had a great answer there to the question about some biopesticides that you can add for Fusarium in cuttings. If you wouldn't mind unmuting and answering that. Oh, you're still on mute. Yeah, there we go.
I think, yeah, we had a question by one of the participants, and we answered at the same time. I answered in French because she speaks French, and Zamir answered the same thing. Rootchill and Prestop are the only ones that are approved now. Trichoderma resanium and Gladio, forgot the whole name, for the other one. So they, you apply that preventively. They're not a cure. I think the soonest, like Zamir said earlier, the best it is to apply them, especially if you have an history of it in the cuttings you took from your brother plants. So.
Yeah, I mean, just a follow-up. Zamir, you had mentioned that, was it Pythium or Fusarium that kind of gives off a fishy odor?
Pythium.
Pythium? Okay.
You can smell it.
You can smell it. Okay. You may not see any roots, but you'll definitely have the smelly. Okay. Yeah. Are there other questions? If somebody has a very urgent question and would like to answer, I'm okay. If there is anyone who has got a very important question they'd love to share, feel free to repost it. I am having some difficulties looking into the Q&A, so and if any panelists want to have some final comments or share some thoughts to conclude, that would be great.
Well, I think the search for resistant strains is going to be the key, because we can't continuously rely on various changes in Health Canada PMRA regulations and what you can or can't use. We're lucky that there's such great genetic diversity out there. It's just a matter of somebody sitting down and plonking through all that material to find out what works and what doesn't work. I just got a text here, a chat on ruderalis. I don't think anybody's looked at the wild ruderalis species to see if there may be some sources of resistance there. But I think over time, growers will learn which strains are the ones that are most adapt for their environment. And in that process, we'll select those that have tolerance to some disease.
Yeah, I know with your slide there around resistance to powdery mildew, I was trying to figure out some of the abbreviations to find out which strains you were referring to. So I think that's great information. Look forward to seeing what the breeders will come up with.
Excuse me, I have one question I saw. If I can answer it rapidly. Glen trichogram wasps, timing of release and pheromone traps. Yes, pheromone traps can help. Usually we rely, every year is different, and like with climate change, the dates change a bit. And depending on where you are, for sure, the corn borer, you won't see it west of the Rockies. It isn't there yet. I don't think it will go there yet either. So in all Canadian provinces, you check your provincial, like in Quebec, we have a bulletin that comes out, and they will warn people that it's going to be the time of the corn borer, because usually they have 2 generations in Quebec, but not in all regions, depending on where you are. I think in Ontario, it started about 2 weeks earlier, if I'm not abusing in Quebec. And the pheromone traps, you can contact me. You'll find my information, and I'll guide you about that. So it's 5 to 10 week period. We will, depending on the severity, the pest pressure, and where you are situated, that will use the trichogram wasps.
All right, thank you, Claude. We've got 2 last questions that I see that I'd like to have answered, if the panelists don't mind. The first one is regarding the ability to spray xeritol prior to harvest, and if that will reduce any of the other microbial. So I guess the question is, a major hort supplier suggested that we could use biopesticides near the end of production, and that if worried about microbial testing afterwards, just hit it with xeritol. Is this done routinely?
I mean, I can jump in. Others may have other opinions, but I think anything that's sprayed close to harvest runs a risk. And xeritol is not necessarily the most effective product out there. It's hydrogen peroxide. It's going to break down pretty fast under sunlight. And you're also adding moisture to your bud when you spray anything. And so if you can avoid any sprays closer to the end, you're certainly better off. I'm going to say 3 weeks prior to harvest. The problem, of course, is botrytis sets in 3 weeks before harvest. And there's not a whole lot you can do there because once it's established, it's internal. And any sprays you put on the outside may or may not have any effect. Others may have other experience on this.
Does anyone else want to share?
If I can add to that, I mean, I'm kind of with Samir. I'll just go a different angle to that. Like the one cannabis grower that I had his beds inside the greenhouse and was basically recycling them all the time, kept planting. This was not an issue that he had. We need to, like, I completely agree with Samir, like we have to continue to look for resistant strains and all that stuff, but there's a whole other part to this puzzle. We need, if we help establish a holistic system and a holistic approach with cover crop cropping, nutrient, all that stuff, there is that component too that we're just sliding through. We got to stop there and we got to spend more time. Behind the majority of pests and diseases can be found a nutritional issue. And so if we don't address that, how do we maximize the genetic potential of the plants that we have found? I just want to put it out there that there's still a lot of work to be done here.
Perfect. Yeah, excellent. The first step of good IPM is good crop nutrition. I'm not sure if Anu had some comments. I see her hand. Yep.
So I'm going to jump on both of those and agree with both gentlemen. The other, we're going to just veer a little bit off to this side. I have a feeling that somebody watching this panel went, but wait, the label of xeritol says for use on botrytis. So that being said, yes, the label does specifically say xeritol is for use on combating botrytis. But exactly as Amir said, do you really want to be introducing additional moisture at that critical phase? No. Because for those of you that aren't familiar with botrytis, it is evil. It does not need a lot of time to destroy your crop. It can take your crop out in a matter of days. And when you are harvesting a very, very large room, you are also at the mercy of how fast your post-harvest department can process your plants. So if you want to add more moisture into your room while you are depending on your post-harvest team to be able to keep up to you, you are definitely adding a very high risk factor into the situation. The other aspect of that as well is your QA department might actually have already kiboshed any type of application, be it biological or chemical, beyond that two-week post-harvest time frame. So you might not be able to even consider that as well. I have actually never ever heard anybody refer to that. So when I actually saw that comment, I was mortified actually reading that. I find that to be, in my personal opinion, I actually find that to be disturbing information. I don't like that information. So.
Thank you so much. Maybe
if I can just add, one quick comment to that as well. One of the best, like Samir and what Anu just said too, botrytis it's not something that happened just in the last minute either. It's something that, when your crop gets to that point, it can become an issue. So preventatively, make sure that your crop has adequate levels of silica. That is one of the greatest cell strengthening nutrients that are out there, and it's sort of not really being talked about. It's just a simple, cheap solution that can do a lot.
And that's to jump on that. That's what people can actually use the potassium silicate as their pH up. So instead of buying like pH up, you can actually use the potassium silicate as your pH up. The only problem with that is it gums your lines up. So that's the beauty of the potassium silicate is actually helps strengthen the cell walls, the tissues of the cell walls. So it makes it even difficult for the hyphae to actually penetrate through. So yeah, brilliant. Potassium silicate is awesome. I use it in my plants as my pH up.
I'm going to end, Randy and Dania haven't kicked me off yet. So I'm going to ask one last question just to really, there was a lot of talk about neighboring fields and perhaps even using your neighboring field as a bit of a banker area for either beneficials or to trap, for example, if you're next to a hay field, how much of that hay field should you leave to ensure that your ligus bug or your thrips, any midges or anything like that that might migrate over. What is your feeling of creating a buffer zone or banker area and the opportunity for either beneficials or pests interfering? And that could be Claude or Zamir or anyone who has comments around what happens with neighboring fields and movement of insects.
We'll go for the insects. In fact, it would be me. I would see a band as large as the cannabis in between many rows. Would be enough to know what's surrounding you is a plus for sure. Like I said, garlic, leek, things like that, trips. And I'll let Zamir talk if he something to do about pathogen. Say again about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to create neighborly wars between yourself and the neighbor that you used to get along with until you heard me speak. My word of caution is know what's next to your field and understand some of the diseases that may come over. It just happens that blueberry and hay fields and cabbage fields are the ones that we knew were spreading disease, and garlic. We talked about thrips coming from garlic, but botrytis affects garlic. And there are species of botrytis that will come from a garlic field or an onion field and infect a cannabis or hemp field. So in some ways, it's almost unavoidable. I mean, nature is such that things are going to be moving back and forth, but keep an eye open so that you're aware if you do get an outbreak of some disease that you hadn't experienced before, it may have originated from one of those fields that is nearby. And when I say nearby, 250 meters, a lot of spores can travel that far. So just be aware, get to know your neighbor perhaps, and discuss with them if you think there may be something migrating over. People concerned about pesticide drift. We've had some reports of pesticides being used for aphids and insects on a blueberry field, migrating over and showing up on a cannabis field. But I'm thinking more spores and other things that might move.
All right, with that, I'm absolutely amazed with the generosity of sharing of this knowledge. It's immense gratitude to our panelists for their time and wealth of knowledge, and then the willingness to share that knowledge. So thank you, and thank you to all the attendees. I mean, we have 88 people who stayed on for a little over an hour and a half or more. Thank you so much for that. I do encourage you to. I might not be the moderator next time, but we may have another session in May. Hopefully, we can bring you back out. Thanks again to the panelists. Stay safe, take care of others, and happy growing. Thanks so much.